On the sun-baked plains of East Africa, a matriarch stops mid-stride. She lifts her trunk into the wind, and 40 tons of family history goes still behind her. 6,000 kilometers away, in the green half-light of a Sri Lankan forest, another matriarch does exactly the same thing, head raised, ears spread, listening to a world most of us cannot hear. Two animals, one name that history gave them both, elephant. But look closer and almost nothing about them is quite the same. Different ears, different tusks, different trunks, different backs, different minds, and different fates. This is the story of the two elephants, how millions of years of separate evolution built two giants out of the same blueprint, and why, after everything, only one of them may still be here in 100 years. Today, WildForge explores every dimension that separates these two icons of the animal kingdom, their origins, their anatomy, their family life, their intelligence, their very different histories with the humans who share their world, and the very different futures they now face. There are 3 species of elephant alive today, though for most of human history we only ever spoke of 2. All 3 trace back to a common ancestor that walked the earth roughly 7.5 million years ago. Since then, Africa and Asia have shaped their elephants the way a river shapes stone, slowly, relentlessly, and in completely different directions. The African elephant grew into a giant built for open horizons and merciless heat. The Asian elephant grew smaller, quieter, and better suited to the tangled cover of forest, an animal built to disappear. The story is actually more layered than a simple two-way split. Africa itself hosts 2 distinct species, now recognized separately by science. The African bush elephant, the giant of open savanna most people picture, and the African forest elephant, a smaller, straighter tusked cousin adapted to the dense rainforests of Central and West Africa. Forest elephants have rounder ears, pinkish tusks angled almost straight down rather than curved outward, and rarely exceed half the weight of their savanna relatives. A reminder that African elephant was, for generations of naturalists, really shorthand for 2 very different animals wearing the same name. Asia carries its own internal variation. Taxonomists recognize 3 living subspecies of Asian elephant. The mainland Indian elephant, found from India through Indochina and by far the most numerous. The Sri Lankan elephant, the largest of the 3 subspecies and often the darkest in color, sometimes carrying distinctive patches of depigmentation on the ears and face. And the Sumatran elephant, the smallest of all, found only on the Indonesian island of Sumatra, and now critically endangered, with fewer than 3,000 believed to remain as logging and palm oil plantations consume its forest home. So when someone says African elephant or Asian elephant, they're really compressing several distinct animals into 2 convenient categories, useful for comparison but worth remembering as an oversimplification of a much richer family tree. To the untrained eye, an elephant is an elephant, gray, enormous, unmistakable. But once you know what to look for, the differences are so consistent, so visible, that mixing them up starts to feel almost impossible. Let's start with the feature everyone notices first. An African elephant's ears are almost a caricature of themselves, vast, fan-shaped, and so large that a single ear can measure nearly 2 meters from top to bottom. Held up against the light, their outline echoes the shape of the African continent itself, a coincidence so neat that generations of guides have used it as a memory trick for tourists. Those ears are not just for hearing, they are a cooling system. Africa's savanna sun can push air temperatures past 40 degrees Celsius, and an elephant has almost no sweat glands. Instead, it relies on a dense network of blood vessels running just beneath the surface of each ear. By flapping them, sometimes thousands of times a day, the elephant pushes blood through those vessels and sheds heat into the air, cooling the blood by several degrees before it circulates back through the body. The Asian elephant's ears tell a cooler story, quite literally. Smaller, more rectangular, and folded slightly at the top edge like a dog-eared page, they still help with temperature regulation, but the pressure is lower. Asian elephants live largely in shaded forest, where canopy cover does much of the cooling work the ears would otherwise have to handle alone. Tusks are elongated incisor teeth, and in African elephants, both males and females typically grow them, long curved sweeping outward and up, sometimes reaching 3 meters and weighing over 100 pounds in the largest recorded bulls. A tusk is not just decoration. Elephants use them to strip bark from trees, dig for water and salt in dry riverbeds, spar with rivals and defend calves. Asian elephants complicate the picture considerably. Only some males grow visible tusks. These individuals are called tuskers, and in parts of Sri Lanka, they make up as little as 5% of the adult male population. Males without visible tusks are known as maknas, and females almost never develop tusks at all. When they do, they're small, thin growths called tushes that barely emerge past the lip. This single difference has had brutal consequences. Decades of ivory poaching selectively targeted animals that carried tusks, and because African elephants of both sexes typically have them, the pressure fell on nearly the entire population. In Asian elephants, poaching has instead skewed the sex ratio of entire herds, since only a fraction of males were ever worth killing for ivory, two very different vulnerabilities born from one anatomical difference. Look at the trunk, and the two species reveal another of their clearest anatomical signatures. An elephant's trunk is arguably the most versatile organ in the animal kingdom, a fusion of nose and upper lip containing somewhere in the region of 40,000 individual muscles, with no bone or cartilage to speak of. It can uproot a tree, and it can pick up a single blade of grass. The African elephant's trunk ends in two finger-like projections, one on top and one below, working together almost like a thumb and finger, a design so dexterous that African elephants have been filmed picking up objects as small as a coin. The Asian elephant's trunk has only one such projection on the top surface, which it presses against the underside of the trunk to grip objects, a slightly less precise but no less effective solution to the same problem. Size is where the two species part ways most dramatically. A fully grown African bush elephant bull can stand up to 4 meters at the shoulder and weigh between 6 and 7 tons, with the largest confirmed individuals pushing past 10, the largest land animal alive today. The Asian elephant is a smaller creature by comparison, though calling any animal that can weigh 5 tons smaller requires a certain amount of perspective. Bulls typically reach around 3 meters at the shoulder and weigh between 3 and 6 tons, roughly 2/3 the mass of their African cousins. That size gap is not accidental. Africa's open savannas offer fewer places to hide and far more competition for food and water, conditions that historically rewarded sheer bulk. Asia's dense forests impose the opposite pressure. A smaller body moves more efficiently through tangled undergrowth. Stand an African and an Asian elephant side by side, and even their outline gives them away. The African elephant's back curves downward in the middle, dipping into what's often described as a saddle or concave shape, with the highest points at the shoulders and hips. The Asian elephant's back does the opposite, arching upward into a smooth convex curve that peaks somewhere near the middle of the spine. Part of why, for thousands of years, it was the Asian elephant that ended up wearing actual saddles. A convex back is simply easier and safer to sit on, one of several small anatomical reasons Asian elephants became the species humans chose to work alongside. The skin tells its own story. African elephants have deeply wrinkled, rough hide that traps up to 10 times more moisture than smooth skin would, helping the animal stay cool through evaporation long after a mud bath has technically ended. Asian elephants have comparatively smoother skin, often marked with patches of pink depigmentation around the ears, trunk, and face, a trait so individual that some researchers and mahouts can identify specific elephants by their unique blotch patterns alone. Even their feet differ in small but consistent ways. Asian elephants generally carry 5 toenails on each front foot and 4 on each back foot. African elephants usually have 1 fewer on each. There's one more difference most people never think about: teeth. Elephants don't simply run out of energy in old age. In a very real sense, they run out of teeth. Both species are born with a set of molars that wear down from years of grinding tough vegetation, and rather than growing new teeth beneath the old ones the way humans do, an elephant's replacement molars emerge from the back of the jaw and slide forward, pushing the worn set out like a conveyor belt. Over a lifetime, an elephant goes through 6 sets of these molars. The 6th and final set typically has to last from around the age of 40 until death, and once it wears down completely, usually sometime in the animal's 60s, there is no 7th set waiting behind it. An elephant that outlives its final molars can no longer chew efficiently, one of the leading natural causes of death in old elephants of both species. An adult elephant eats an almost unreasonable amount, up to 150 kilograms of vegetation a day, washed down with as much as 200 liters of water, all funneled through a digestive system so inefficient that less than half of what an elephant eats is actually absorbed as nutrition. The rest passes through and back into the ecosystem, seeds and all. African savanna elephants shift their diet with the seasons, grazing on grasses during the wet months when they are abundant and switching to browsing bark, leaves and branches once the dry season strips the plains bare. Asian elephants, living mostly in forest and forest edge habitats, lean more heavily toward browsing year-round, bark, bamboo, fruit and foliage, supplementing with grasses where they're available. In both cases, elephants function as what ecologists call a keystone species. By knocking down trees, elephants convert closed woodland into the open grassland that dozens of other species depend on. By dispersing seeds across vast distances in their dung, they effectively plant forests as they walk. Remove elephants from an ecosystem, and the landscape itself begins to change shape within a generation. Both species organize their lives around one governing principle. The herd is female, and the herd is led by age. A matriarch, typically the oldest and most experienced female, leads a family unit made up of her daughters, granddaughters, and their calves. She carries decades of accumulated memory, where the water holes are in a drought year, which paths are safe, which are not. When she dies, that knowledge doesn't automatically transfer, and herds that lose an old matriarch too early have been shown to make worse decisions for years afterward. African elephants, especially bush elephants living on open savanna, tend to form larger social networks. Core family units of 10 to 20 animals regularly cross paths with other families at water sources, sometimes gathering into loose clan groupings of 100 or more before dispersing again. Asian elephants, hemmed in by denser forest and more fragmented habitat, generally live in smaller, tighter family units, often just 3 to 8 animals, with far less of the large-scale mingling that characterizes life on the African plains. In both species, males leave the family herd around the age of 10 to 15, drifting toward solitary lives or loose, ever-shifting bachelor groups. It's not banishment so much as biology. Adult males compete with each other, not with their sisters, and a herd led by related females runs more smoothly without grown sons contesting the matriarch's decisions. Elephants are, by almost any measure science has devised, among the most cognitively sophisticated animals on Earth. Both species have passed the mirror self-recognition test, a benchmark once thought to separate humans, great apes, and dolphins from every other creature alive. An Asian elephant named Happy at the Bronx Zoo became the first elephant ever confirmed to touch a mark on her own forehead that she could only have seen in a mirror, demonstrating a level of self-awareness researchers had long suspected but never formally proven. Both species communicate using infrasound, rumbles pitched below the range of human hearing, some as low as 5 Hz, that travel for kilometers through open air and even farther through the ground itself. Elephants pick up these vibrations partly through their feet and trunk, which are exquisitely sensitive to seismic signals, allowing separated family members to coordinate movements across distances no human ear could ever bridge. Grief, or something that looks remarkably like it, has been documented in both species. Elephants have been observed standing over the bodies of dead herd members for hours or days, touching the bones with their trunks, sometimes returning to the same site repeatedly over the following years. For all their bulk, elephants are strong, enthusiastic swimmers, and both species take to water with what looks like genuine delight. A submerged elephant can hold its trunk above the surface and breathe through it like a built-in snorkel, an ability that has let elephants cross surprisingly wide channels of open water. Asian elephants have been recorded swimming between islands in the Andaman Sea, covering distances of many kilometers without touching the bottom. Mud is just as important as water, if considerably less glamorous. A fresh coat of wet mud, applied by trunk across the back and flanks, dries into a natural sunscreen and insect barrier, protecting skin that would otherwise be vulnerable to sunburn and biting flies. Dust baths serve a similar purpose, and both behaviors are frequently social. Calves in particular seem to treat mud wallows as something close to a playground, wrestling, sliding, and climbing over adults with an energy that looks, to any observer, exactly like fun. Elephants carry the longest pregnancy of any mammal on Earth, roughly 22 months, nearly 2 full years in both African and Asian species. A newborn calf arrives weighing well over 100 kilograms and stands within an hour, guided upright by its mother and the other females of the herd, who form a protective circle around the newcomer almost immediately. Calves nurse for 2 to 3 years, but often stay close to their mothers for a decade or longer, learning everything from which plants are safe to eat to how to use their own trunks, a skill that remarkably is not fully instinctive and takes months of clumsy practice to master. Female calves typically remain with their birth family for life. Males, as we've seen, eventually strike out on their own. Given that gestation period and the years of dependent childhood that follow, elephant populations of both species grow slowly under the best of conditions, a fact that makes them exceptionally vulnerable whenever poaching, conflict, or habitat loss pushes mortality rates upward. A species that takes 22 months to produce a single calf cannot simply breed its way back from a population collapse. Here, the two species diverge most sharply of all. Asian elephants have worked alongside humans for at least 4,000 years, hauling timber, carrying royalty into battle, and taking part in religious processions from Kerala to Chiang Mai. Historically, kings across South and Southeast Asia maintained armies that included hundreds of war elephants, animals so valuable that owning one was for centuries a direct marker of political power. Even today, thousands of Asian elephants live and work in close contact with people, cared for by mahouts in relationships that, depending on the country and the individual animal, range from genuinely close partnerships to serious welfare concerns. Crucially, though, no elephant has ever truly been domesticated in the genetic sense that dogs or horses have been. Every working elephant, Asian or African, is still a wild animal captured and trained within its own lifetime. There is no domesticated bloodline being bred for temperament the way there is with livestock. African elephants have a far shorter working relationship with humans, but not a non-existent one. The most famous example comes from antiquity. Hannibal Barca's crossing of the Alps in 218 BC, using war elephants believed to be African forest elephants, a now largely vanished practice that Carthage and Ptolemaic Egypt both once relied on. That tradition faded almost entirely by the end of the classical era, and African elephants have remained overwhelmingly wild ever since. Part of why, to this day, they have a reputation for being considerably harder to tame than their Asian relatives. The cultural weight the two species carry reflects that same divide. In Hinduism and Buddhism, the Asian elephant is woven directly into religious identity. Ganesha, the elephant-headed deity worshipped across South Asia, is one of the most recognized gods in the world, and white or pale elephants have historically been treated as sacred, even royal property. In Thailand and Myanmar, African elephants occupy a different symbolic space, more closely tied to the idea of the wild itself, a totem of untamed Africa rather than a figure of temple and palace. The numbers tell an uncomfortable story. African savanna elephants number somewhere in the region of 350 to 400,000 individuals, classified as endangered by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Their close relative, the African forest elephant, recognized as a fully separate species only in 2021, has fared far worse, its population having collapsed by well over 80% in just 3 decades, earning it the more severe classification of critically endangered. Asian elephants stand at a fraction of even that reduced number. Somewhere between 40 and 50,000 animals remain in the wild, scattered across 13 range countries from India to Indonesia, most of them squeezed into shrinking, disconnected pockets of forest. By some estimates, there are roughly 10 African elephants alive for every single Asian elephant left on the planet. The threats differ by geography but rhyme in substance. African elephants face relentless poaching pressure for ivory, alongside habitat fragmentation as farmland and settlements expand into former range. Asian elephants face comparatively less poaching, a consequence again of how few individuals even carry tusks, but far more acute habitat loss, since much of their range overlaps with some of the most densely populated regions on Earth. Human-elephant conflict, as villages and elephant corridors increasingly collide, now kills hundreds of elephants and dozens of people across Asia every single year. Both species are protected under international law. Both are the subject of intensive conservation programs, from anti-poaching units in Kenya's Masai Mara to elephant corridors being restored across Assam and Sumatra. And both, despite everything working against them, remain, for now. So, what is the real difference between an African elephant and an Asian elephant? At the taxonomic level, the difference runs deeper than most people realize. 3 living species in total, plus 3 further subspecies of Asian elephant alone, all descended from a common ancestor 7.5 million years ago. At the physical level, the African elephant is larger, with vast heat-shedding ears, tusks in both sexes, a concave back, and a 2-fingered trunk tip. The Asian elephant is smaller, with a convex back, a single-fingered trunk tip, and far fewer tusk-bearing individuals. At the behavioral level, both live in matriarch-led family herds and communicate through infrasound too low for human ears, but African elephants form larger, looser social networks, while Asian elephants keep to smaller, tighter family units suited to dense forest. At the ecological level, both are keystone species that reshape the landscapes they walk through: grazers and grassland builders in Africa, forest browsers and seed planters in Asia. At the cultural level, the Asian elephant has worked and worshipped alongside humans for 4,000 years, while the African elephant has remained, almost throughout history, a creature of the true wild. And at the conservation level, both species are declining, both are protected, and both now depend entirely on decisions humans make in the next few decades. Both are extraordinary products of evolution, both command respect, and both remind us that the natural world continues to produce animals of a complexity and capability that we are still only beginning to understand. Thank you for watching.